We are glad that you are joining us today, wherever you're at. If you've made it this far, we thank you so much. We don't know how we've made it this far.
Yeah, thanks for sticking with us through the technical issues, through the content issues, through the challenges of starting. It means a lot, and we've gotten a lot of feedback from people, which we really appreciate. We're always open to that, and we believe that those interactions and those relationships will only make this a better thing.
Yeah. Okay, so this is episode 8, and today we're going to be talking about the messiness of relationships.
Before we get into the whole idea of messy relationships and how we're going to do that in life, we wanted to talk about how we're coming up with this content. And we got some help from a friend of ours, Yaz, who helped us come up with pillars. Things we want to talk about that we feel are relevant to intergenerational conversations and relationships.
These 5 pillars are, for us, they're signposts, and our goal is that in each episode we hit one of these pillars, and so it's behind the scenes. It gives us a way to navigate, our content and what we want to be talking about, but we want to let our listeners in on that, so you have an idea of why we're talking about what we're talking about and how we come up with some of the stuff.
Yeah, and we're not going to go into a lot of detail because you could spend a whole 2 or 3 podcasts talking about all this, but basically they're holistic living, how our daily habits impact our relationships.
The whole, body, soul, spirit.
Right.
So
spirituality and mindfulness, how spiritual practices help us communicate better in our relationships. Why didn't you do the third one?
So our third pillar is meaningful relationships, which we'll be talking about today, but getting a little bit more specific into the messiness of those relationships.
Yeah, and what makes those relationships really meaningful.
Yeah, and why they're important.
Go ahead, do the fourth one.
The fourth one is personal growth and development. So how does personal growth affect our approach to life, to relationships, to everything else in the world?
And the last one is intergenerational connections. And for me, that's primary in my thinking. What can we as people from different generations learn from each other and encourage each other and relate to each other?
And Yaz really, we spent a lot of time developing these, and it's really hitting on just what's important to us and what we've learned through our own lived experience. And so, again, we're not just jumping into an episode and talking randomly. We're really thinking about these intentionally and diving in that way.
Right. And for me personally, and as I coach, because I coached for a lot of years now, in my relationships with God and with people, if we can't apply what we're learning, why are we even doing it? It's not just saying something or talking about stuff. It's what are we going to do with it? What's the next thing? How do we be this?
And I think all of our pillars, they're active. They're not passive. I mean, I think that's pretty much what you're saying too, now that we're starting episode 8, this is actually us starting over. So starting from the beginning and hitting that pillar. So again, we wanted to let y'all in on that insight just to, because you're with us on the journey. And if you have feedback about that or just ideas, again, shoot them our way.
You have insight because you're on the inside.
Ooh, yeah. One of the best ways that y'all can support us is to continue listening, giving feedback.
Send money.
Right. My Venmo account is ... No, but is doing what you're doing already, but subscribing, commenting on, our posts, things like that. And then again, just just continue giving us your opinions and your feedback and your experience as you're watching, not just what we're talking about, but how do you feel when you're watching or listening to us?
Right. Any one that approaches us with a real desire to have dialogue, we welcome. We aren't, you don't have to agree. We've said this the whole time. It's not about us agreeing, but can we sit down and dialogue with each other? To me, that's part of the mess that I like. Speaking of mess.
Yeah, which is pretty cool too, because it gives us practice and whoever's listening practice in real time with what we're doing. So
it gives me practice in not thinking I'm right about everything.
Right.
Not jamming my opinion down somebody's throat just because I think I'm right.
Yeah, I have some questions about that later. We'll get to it. Okay, so let's jump in here. How do we embrace the complexities and the conflicts in our relationships from day-to-day life to over a long period of time?
Yeah, and guess what? They're almost always complex.
Well, let's kind of, maybe we should define messy, because it's all messy, right? We're humans, so that's just the underlying. In
the dictionary, there's a picture of our family next to messy relationships.
Right. And this is something that has been an ongoing learning curve my entire life, but being okay and at peace with the messiness of me as a person, and then our family, and realizing that I don't have to have it polished or figured out in real time. And that's has to do with a lot of my perfectionism and my desire to be loved and not rejected and all of that stuff. So, there's...
Take a breath. Come on. I'm going, but, get, wait, ooh.
Is that why you interrupt me all the time?
Yeah, because I'm trying to get a word in. Can we be comfortable with being uncomfortable? Can we get to that place?
Well, it's weird because it's like a paradox, but
paradox.
I think that's also a gift of being human, I think in the big picture, we are able to hold things within paradox, but I feel like our world, society, our own limiting beliefs tells us otherwise.
And there's so much stuff here.
Question for you then, because I think it's important that we all are on the same page of that messiness, because I think of that one and just the natural state that we are, where, thoughts, feelings mixed with other people's thoughts and feelings creates this messiness. But then I also think of messiness as the toxic, where it's behaviors that maybe aren't the best. And you really have to learn them. But where do you draw the line of okay, this is messy, yes, but messy to the point where it's getting into more of the toxic behavior? Or does that make sense?
Well, maybe there's messy and then there's mess. There's messiness within relationships, and then you can have real messes.
Right.
And I don't know if that makes sense. But yeah. So were you going to ask a question?
Oh, I think that's where I'm trying to figure out how to how to define messiness from a healthy place versus the unnecessary drama and unnecessary dialogue,
toxicity of relationships.
Yeah, that we create. So
yeah,
I think we need to be able to define both of those.
There are some really toxic relationships out there that are unhealthy, that are even dangerous. Mm-hmm. You shouldn't just stay in the mess. If you get along all the time, if a person gets along all the time with everybody around them or in their relationships, then somebody in that relationship isn't really being honest. Mm-hmm. And can we be okay with that mess? It's like when I first married your mother, the first thing I learned, which I've said it before, is how selfish I was. It's not all about me. And we had to get real honest about some of the things that when we first got married about our relationship, because I'd disappear for 8 hours, not communicate where I was, what I was doing. And meanwhile, Mom didn't know if I was okay, what was going on, if I was having an affair early on or whatever. She just didn't know.
So would you say that there are times in y'all's relationship that were toxic?
I'm sure. I mean,
because that's part of it too. It's like you realize, oh, this is toxic behavior. So we're either going to stay in this or we're going to get out of this.
Or you're going to work it out, because sometimes just because you have a disagreement with somebody doesn't mean it's toxic.
No, I mean conflict is really good.
But if you're you're married to someone and they beat you, or you beat them because you don't agree on something, I'm being real extreme here, or somebody keeps having an affair after affair after affair, and it doesn't, and you don't deal with it, that's toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And you shouldn't, or if it's not safe for you, you shouldn't be in it. We're not saying stay just because you got to work it out and then life is messy. That's different than having growing together, evolving, working out your issues. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. I mean, I think too, that's what's hard is, let's just say it's two people or our family. Like there's 6 of us in the immediate family.
Mm-hmm.
And, we've all had to get to this place where we're okay in the mess, one, and that we accept each other where we're at. And it hasn't always been like that. And I know a lot of people who have, obviously they have messy families too, but one person isn't open to change, doesn't have a growth mindset. So I think that's one of the harder parts is you're trying to build and sustain a relationship in your life. Let's say it's like your mom or your dad, but they're not in a place where they want to grow or that they want to grow together, so how do we deal with that?
Yeah, you grow together or you grow apart. You grow or you die, right?
Yeah.
And that can happen in relationships. Well, you just mentioned growth mindset. So what is a growth mindset? A growth mindset is where individuals understand that their talents and abilities can be developed through hard work, good strategies, and input from others. They love to learn, and resilience is essential for their accomplishments. Whereas a fixed mindset is the opposite of that. A fixed mindset is where individuals believe their abilities, intelligence, and talents are fixed traits. In other words, they just are part of how you were wired.
Yeah, I am who I am.
Yeah, and those people think that they have a certain amount of intelligence and they can't do much to change that. They're reluctant to take on challenges. They avoid things, and they give up easily on relationships.
Right. So yeah, we have. So then what do you do in real life when, again, what I was asking about, like if you have someone who you're in a relationship with, whether that's platonic or family, or marriage, whatever, but how do you move the needle, as we say, when the other person is not there or does not want to?
Well, if I was coaching somebody in that regard, I would say, what do you control in a relationship?
Yourself.
Yeah. Your behaviors, your responses, your attitude, etc. It's a mistake to go try to control somebody else. That creates toxicity when you get into that kind of an area. But a person with a growth mindset is going to embrace the challenge of those relationships. They're going to keep going in the face of setbacks, and they can see effort as a way to grow. If you apply yourself, if you learn from your mistakes, and you see the other person as somebody that you want to have that kind of relationship with, you can have a growth mindset.
Yeah, but again, it doesn't really get to the core of what I'm asking of like, what do you do? Like if, let's just say your father has no desire to grow or change or whatever, and you want this relationship with your dad, and it just doesn't happen, and it creates unnecessary drama in your life. What do you do with that?
Well, yeah, and this is not an easy answer, but if you believe in praying, I would start with that. If you don't, or that's not something that you're comfortable with, I'd say get comfortable with it. But the thing is you have to look at yourself. You can't make somebody do something they don't want to do, because you can force them at gunpoint or threaten or whatever, and they'll do it because they're afraid. But it doesn't really change their attitude that much. But you have to, is what do I control is the question. My father, well, like with us, when you were in your teens, we had some confrontations. We had some issues. My attitude is, as I quit being stubborn and started looking at it from your perspective, is what do I need to do here to make this work? How I handle this is going to make all the difference. I was a grown man. You were a young woman in your teens. I had more life experience. I was waiting for you to make all the changes, but really what it needed to happen is I need to make those changes and not be concerned with you changing. Mm-hmm. That's hard because we go, no, they should change. We're always pointing the finger, but the real issue is you. What do you need to do to make this work?
Right.
How long did it take us?
I mean, a decade.
Yeah.
Or longer, right?
And
to get to the place where we're at right now,
right.
where we can have uncomfortable conversations, have disagreements, and still show up, I guess.
Yeah, well, and you have a growth mindset. You always have had that.
I feel like I have often, like for as long as I can remember, I feel like I've had a desire to learn and to grow.
Sought knowledge. Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so I had to go, this isn't about her, this is about me. My job isn't to fix Hilary. She's not a project, although in my wiring, I make people projects. I have a tendency to do that and want to go fix them. But in my prayers for you, it was, she isn't a project. You don't need to fix anything. You just need to love her and be her father, mm-hmm. and be there when she needs you. Mm-hmm. You can go on. There's a spectrum there, right? If somebody is, say, doing heroin, for example, it doesn't mean you just stay there and love them so much that you just keep letting them do heroin. But at some point, you have to let them go.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
I mean, like, you don't just sit there and watch them kill themselves.
Right, right. Well, I think something I remember growing up, you saying, it was dad advice, which I maybe at the time, I think I started to appreciate that probably like in my college years. But when you're young and you're learning about who you are and you're really defining yourself by who your friends are, that can be obviously a battle, and you have fallouts and you have drama and things like that. But I remember you saying, like, sometimes you have to divorce your friends. Yeah. And that was a hard one for me because I had a pretty toxic friendship in college that it was really hard to let go of. Mm. And it kind of got to the point where it was the breaking point, and I had to make that decision of, I cannot have this person in my life.
So talk about it a little. How'd you do it?
Gosh, it's been years now, so it's hard to remember. I think it didn't really end the prettiest, but instead of chasing it and trying to fix it, because I tend to want to fix as well or leave it in a peaceful way. Yeah. I think I had to just let it go and let it be.
Well, you make a good point. Is we have this nirvana sense about, well, if I break up this relationship or I end this relationship, that it's all got to end on a sweet major chord note and everything will be right in the world.
Right.
Sometimes it's not.
Mm-hmm. That's like Hollywood at its finest. All movies basically end, happy, and when they don't, that's beyond Hollywood, but I think as humans we want that happy ending, we want that resolution, and so when we don't get that, especially in real life, that can be hard to sit with, because also like saying goodbye to a friend or accepting that this person no longer is meant to be in your life, there's the grieving process, and you have to navigate that. And again, it's just messy because I was never taught how to grieve, and I don't want to even say the right way because everyone grieves in their own way.
Right.
But there are valuable and productive steps for how you navigate your emotions.
Right.
Whether it be that grief or sadness.
Well, that's part of life too, is learning it.
Mm-hmm.
You as a parent, as a boomer, I had ideal outcomes for all my kids.
And we have been the biggest disappointments in your life. I'm just kidding.
No, I mean, but that is a thing that one has to let go of. How you live your life is not up to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so those, we all, as parents, we look at some of the relationships y'all had coming up. Some of them weren't good, and we said something about it.
What about, can you think of any relationship in your life that needed to be mended or was toxic that you kind of had to set aside?
I'm very relational. But yeah, I was thinking, I'll keep it real general, is when I decided to move across the country.
Which time?
The first time when I got out of the Navy, I decided to move. Mm. Well, I had built relationships in the city that I lived in, and we were really close, really tight-knit group. And when I felt like it was time for me to move and I said something, it hurt everybody. Another one was I was dating someone, and I was getting ready to propose marriage. And as I thought about it, I realized, you know what? I'm doing this for all the wrong reasons, because it's made me popular, because people like me in that family, their friends like me, but I don't love this person. I like them. I could probably even go into that relationship and we could make it work. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Both of us. Wasn't just on me, on her too. But I realized, you know what? Well, I don't really love this person the way I should, mm-hmm. or the way she would expect. And I had to go tell her and her parents that wasn't going to happen. And there were a lot of hurt.
How old were you when that happened?
In my 20s.
Yeah.
I realized that I loved your mom, though, and I had been denying it and pushing it off and all that. And I went, what am I doing? Mm-hmm. I love Lori, and I want to go forward with this. Mm-hmm. That was hard.
Yeah. So was that relationship toxic, would you say?
Not at all. That was the hard part. It wasn't toxic. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't honest. Mm-hmm. That was, and it was subtle. That was the harder part of it. It'd be different if it was violent, or, we were screaming at each other and all that, and whatever. This was real subtle. Mm-hmm. Because of our attitudes, we could have made it work, but it wouldn't have been the best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, honesty definitely plays a huge part, and I think that's something we have to learn.
Well, honesty,
right?
Yeah. What else? Respect.
Yeah, respect. And how do we? Bringing those, not just the word, but the concept in this state of being in regard to respecting someone or being honest with someone. Like, are people naturally honest and respectful?
Well, I have an acronym for it.
Ooh. But does it answer that question?
Maybe. Let's see. So respect. In terms of having a healthy relationships, I think you have to start with honesty, like you said, and respect, which mm-hmm. respect would be being honest. The first one is being responsive. That's the R. Responsiveness. How do you respond to the other person? It doesn't necessarily mean verbally, but are you paying attention and responding in kind? The E is empathy. The S is sincerity. Are we being sincere in our relationships? Are we posing? Are we, lying flat out? P is patience. That's when I'm still learning that. The E is equality. With my relationships with your mother, I never, ever thought that she was less than in any way.
Mm-hmm.
I never forced, I'm a man, I know better than you, I'm stronger, blah, 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 whatever those things are. I never did that. I always looked at your mom as an equal, and it's the same with her. And I did that with you kids, 3 girls and a boy. I never differentiated between the 4 of you, at least in my knowingly that there was any difference in your abilities, intelligence, or capabilities.
Do you think, though, that is something that was just ingrained in you as part of your personality, or do you think that you were taught that?
Both.
Mm-hmm.
The C is compassion, and the T is tolerance, which is a majorly abused word, you know. But having tolerance for somebody that doesn't do things the way you think they ought to or like you would do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
that's hard.
That's respect.
I think for me, what sticks out, just makes me kind of, my life memory flash, is the sincerity part and the tolerance part. And I feel like I'm sincere, but I'm just thinking of one of my last relationships where I thought I was going to marry
Mm-hmm.
that person, and realizing that we were both doing this. It wasn't just me, but this was, again, learning through the mess, was that, okay, I'm quote unquote keeping the peace, but it was a false peace, because I was not talking about what was really worrying me or that I was stressed about for fear of how she would respond.
So would you say that you were lying?
I guess so. Yeah. And it wasn't like, oftentimes I think of lying as this malevolent, like, insidious thing where I don't think.
Insidious.
Yeah. What did I say?
Insidious, which is kind of like deciduous, which is trees. Insidious.
I'm thinking of the word insidious.
What?
I'm thinking of, like, when it creeps. What is it called?
Insidious.
Insidious?
My daughter, with a master's degree, that makes up words on the fly in the moment.
Shut up.
Which leads us to the next area of humor and laughter.
I didn't even get to finish.
It wasn't that important. No, go ahead. So anyway, what were you saying?
Well, like, I often think of lying as this, like, you're,
insidious thing.
Yeah, or you're scheming behind. But it I feel like I didn't know what I didn't know, and so it wasn't coming from like a
malicious thing.
Yeah, it was just out of, like, again, that's when I had to start dissecting my trauma and why I act the way I act, and why I, in that relationship, I so badly wanted it to work out. I was willing to manipulate, and
well, it's that whole unconscious incompetence, right?
Right.
So you can be dishonest in an ignorant way, right? Mm-hmm. You don't know what you don't know. But once you do know and you have awareness, then what do? And then, what is your response? You said something earlier about the messiness and learning.
Yeah, learning in the mess.
And really, that is where you do learn. So learning how to embrace the messiness and then respond in kind with a growth mindset and move, I'm using all the buzzwords, and then move the needle toward awareness and toward being competent about your relationships.
Yeah. And I think a big thing for me unpacking is not beating myself up in that process, because mistakes are bad, and I have to have it all polished and together, and how, again, that's where it's learning about yourself from a curious place.
Well, that ego, right? Mm-hmm. It's, we don't want to look bad. Yeah. We don't want to look incompetent, and so we pose, which is lying to the people that are important to us in those relationships, when really, if we're honest, it's scary.
Yeah. Well, I think, and that's where it's, when you are making friends or building the friendships you already have, or whatever dynamic that relationship is having the people who will be real with you in that way, and allow you to practice. That's something I love about my friendship with Darby. That's something, like, just, I mean, even with one of my newer friends, like that's something that's been really cool to see is like in real time, I caught myself being dishonest with how I felt. When someone asks you how you are, sometimes I don't want to tell them what's really going on.
Yeah.
Because that's just, that word is, we say it so mindlessly, and I don't want to overshare, and I almost always overshare. It doesn't seem like a big deal, you know, when we catch ourselves, oh no, it's just a little all these white lies. But in this moment, I think it was just a text, and I was like sobbing, and my friend, you know, she was just like, how are you? And I was like, oh, everything's great. And then I was like, wait, I'm not great. And it's just,
it's a filler word almost.
Yeah, it is. And I really appreciate her and this new friendship, because I feel like we're both at this place where we're wanting to grow and we're wanting to support. And so again, like, we all deserve people in our lives who are there to support us and will be there to lift us up. And I think,
and vice versa, right?
Yeah, us doing that to others, you're saying?
Mutual.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, again, what you were back to, you said this a while ago. It's like, if I want that in my friendships, then I've got to be that in my friendships and that, or whatever relationships. And so we have to, again, own it.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, there's scripture, and I can't quote it, but there's a place where it talks about this 2,000-year-old advice: let your yes be yes and your no be no, which is honesty. Yeah, okay.
No is a complete sentence.
Yes.
So hard.
That's so true.
I think a big area for us to focus on when, you know, with just being in the mess, is knowing how you operate and how you behave. And again, it just always comes back to that awareness piece. But something you've talked to all of us kids a lot about is that, do you go to silence or do you go to violence?
Yeah.
You want to talk about that a little?
Yeah. If you have not read this book, I highly recommend it. It's called Crucial Conversations. And basically what Crucial Conversation talks about is when you have high stakes, high emotions, and opposing views, you have a crucial conversation. And so what is critical about that is the dialogue.
Like keeping the dialogue
going.
Keeping
that dialogue flowing. But the tendencies of all of us is verbal silence, or you go to verbal violence. Your mom likes to process stuff internally, and she's thinking about it. I'm regurgitating it all over everybody most of the time, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we have an argument, and she'll go, I just need to get away. And I'm going, no, we're going to fight this out. Come back. Don't leave, you know?
Right.
Well, what I'm learning, and this has taken some years, is when that happens, when we have one of those crucial conversations, how do I keep this conversation safe? How do I keep the information and the knowledge and the conversation flowing safely? I don't need to force that on her.
Right.
And she has to work on not going to silence too. We stay in the conversation. I ratchet back the verbal outbursts and stuff like that. She speaks up, and if you notice in your mom, and we've been working on this, is she's finding her voice. She's always been verbal, but she's finding a new voice, and part of that has come from us practicing making room for each other in those crucial conversations.
Yeah.
So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing you talk about mom like that, because I feel like her and I are very similar. I go to silence. KK, my twin, goes to violence. I definitely withdraw, and I think a lot of that is I have fear because I have the rage, but it takes me a long time to get to that tipping point, and so once I'm there, it's hard for me to control.
So that's part of the mess. But you also have awareness about it. So the fact that you are not ignorant about that means that you can do something about it.
Yeah, but like with mom finding her voice, that was something big that I mean, I'm still working on that, but in my previous season, I feel like practicing in real time using my voice and speaking up that ruffled some feathers in some of my relationships where maybe I was not practicing that. And it's always interesting to see who stays when you make those changes and who doesn't, and I've been fortunate that, with my best of friends, we all are, I feel like, wanting to grow. And again, it doesn't mean any of us are even, close to where we want to be. We give each other the space to just tumble through it all.
Right. And that's the beautiful mess. That's what makes life, the messiness of life, to me, a joyful thing. I love the differences. So,
Dad, what are some ways that we can, or you can specifically, just with your role and who you are, engage with the mess of relationship?
For people my age, I would encourage us to initiate conversations, take risk, initiate conversations, and practice just understanding. The question I would ask there is, what's it like to be on the other side of a conversation with you? And then the younger listeners or the younger people that we interact with is just encourage them to be open and receptive to our efforts, because there's this big gap, right? So older ones initiate, take risk. Then the youngers, be open and receptive to that and reciprocate that initiation.
And I think with all of us, is something I've done a lot with you and Mom, and we've talked about this before, but be willing to look in the mirror and see, I'm asking so-and-so to be or to do this, and really look at yourself and say, can I honestly say I am doing this or I'm not?
Right.
And if you aren't, that's owning that. And again, I think that the big thing too is, like, with all this kind of growth, it can be easy to be critical and really, like, beat yourself up. And I say that because because I've done that. I can really get lost in the negative self-talk.
So what do you do when you feel yourself or you sense that you're going down that path?
I think it's that whole having to stop and breathe for a little bit and sit with that. What is this negativity doing to my spirit, to my body, to my actions?
Goes back to our pillars that we've been talking about, literally stopping and breathing and reflecting on what's going on in you, probably more than the other person.
Right. And how it's all interconnected.
Yeah.
And so,
it's true.
Really sitting with that. And I think as I am practicing that, and this is something literally I'm practicing in real time, is being able to catch myself in the moment and flip that around.
Yeah.
Be able to say, wait a second, what is the truth? What is the truth here? What does God say about me? So, Dad, give me your top 3 takeaways of being in the mess.
Embrace the mess in the relationships. Show respect to the other person and take risk. What about you?
1 would be to own it. Own your behavior. Be okay with where you're at. Meet yourself where you're at in that, and own where you're at. 2 would be to pay attention how you talk about yourself. Look at the areas where you start spiraling and being mean to yourself. That's 2. And 3, ask questions. Ask questions to yourself, to whomever you're in a relationship with, and that leads to, I guess, just being curious. Normalize asking clarifying questions of how that person operates.
That's initiative. Initiate that. If you're curious, you're not standing still, you're looking. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. And just be okay with being messy.
Yeah.
And that we all have to start somewhere.
There are some people that are not wired to be messy. They color inside the lines, and everything has to be in a framework, and that's not bad. Taking risk. If you're a rule keeper, sometimes relationships don't fit the parameters, so you have to be what you're talking about.
So, Dad, how about you leave us with some questions? I know we started doing that last episode.
Reflect on these questions. First one is, why can fighting or disagreeing in a relationship not be a bad thing? How do verbal silence and verbal violence impact our communication? What role does respect play in managing relationship conflicts? And what does a growth mindset look like in intergenerational relationships?
That's good. Love that. All right, Dad. Well, love being in the mess with you.
Yeah.
Thanks for sticking it out.
Yep.
And we love you.
Don't ever talk to me again. No.
We love y'all. We're so glad you were with us today. Be safe out in the world. And make sure to tune in next week where we talk about personal growth and development.